can participate. Is that clear? So one volunteer from each group to open up a WebEx room on their laptop, and then anybody who's remote can participate. Thank you. So basically, you're supposed to come up with one theme and then a summary paragraph with what that main session is going to do. Ladies and gentlemen, just giving a 5-minute warning. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please take our seats? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can we please settle down? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, once you've finished, could you please put the description in the document? I sent out the link, and you all have editing rights to the document. So you can just put it into the document, please. Thank you. Did it at once?
Thank you. We're coming back to order here. I'm just trying to understand from Chengetai to make sure that anybody that's participating here in the meeting remotely actually can see the document. And I guess everybody's probably in the WebEx room, so should be able to see the document. Is that a...
Yes, online participants should be able to see the document.
Okay. Okay, if that's not the case, if somebody can let us know. Thank you, everybody, for coming back so promptly. And I think what we want to do in this next phase is we'll ask each one of the groups to take a few minutes and tell us about where they got to, what they're sort of thinking. The task, again, was to try and put together a paragraph or two which says specifically this is what the session would address, with a focus on being as kind of concrete as we can about the policy issue or policy question, or what we would expect as some outputs from the session. And at the end of the day today, we need to decide which ones we think are worthwhile pursuing, continuing to develop, and if there are some that we think are just not kind of substantive enough and cannot be made substantive enough with some further work in the next week or so, then I think we would set them to the side. I don't think there's any need for us to try to get the 6 slots plus the HLPDC and frontier issue slots filled. If we say that 1 or 2 are really not ready or not appropriate, then I think that's fine as well. We would simply have a few less main sessions, and Paul Rowney's mission would have been achieved. So I don't think that's kind of a forcing function either way. And just quickly, by way of, I think the people that went away, I mean, it was Susan and Maria, I think yesterday, went away to kind of document the topping and tailing discussion that we had yesterday in the group, which I think was a really good discussion yesterday, and I took a quick review, but I think the document looks quite good, and I think we don't need to come back and spend time on that today. We have the ad hoc working group that we're going to send a charter and an email list and sign up, that we can take that work off online. But I do think it's important because I think it will help people understand how we're threading all these workshops and all these different sessions together. So I think they did a great piece of work, and thank you very much for turning it around overnight too. And Tamea too, okay. That's right. So let's just start with the top, the group one. At some point before the end of the day today, we need to decide again whether or not it's kind of complete enough and we're going to go forward or not, and we can do that after each one of the session reviews, or we can go through them all and then come back. It's really as the group kind of feels. So we can start with one and see what process feels best.
Thank you, Lynn. Silvia Cadena. Well, the group was Danko, Paul, Cristina, June, Raquel, Lemosia, Jutta, Adama, Silvia, Lucien, Arsène, and Peter, and Henriette, sorry. And after 1 hour of discussions, we have a title. So the title proposed is Content Governance, Rights, Responsibilities, Responses, and Risks. And the idea is that we will be working on the description and the policy questions later on. We were not able to agree on a specific all the text. That we have the elements to come up with a text, but not to propose straight away, to present straight away.
I mean, can you say anything about some of the key elements that you think you'd be pulling in, and maybe a little bit about where you would or wouldn't touch some of the cybersecurity issues, since that was one of the questions from earlier, or points from earlier?
Well, I guess, and please, members of the little group, if you don't mind to jump in if I say something that I shouldn't, please go ahead. The part that we discussed was trying to focus on one stream of content, more around what is extremist, violent, or harmful content, but without specifically mention it on the title, otherwise it will going to be too long, so that will come in the discussion. And it will be around the different regulatory approaches, including co-regulation, self-regulation, and any other mechanisms in terms of responses, and what are the responsibilities of those that implement them and design them, and what are the risks around human rights in that respect. So it might be the case that cybersecurity is part or touched in that discussion, but it was definitely not the focus of the session. The session is, the focus of the session was content governance, and then those elements around rights, responsibilities, responses, and risks from a multi-stakeholder perspective and all of that. So I don't know if Susan or Jutta or Paul or someone else wants to add something, but I don't want to say too much because we don't have an actual paragraph to agree with, and so I don't want to take too much of your time.
No, that was very helpful, and Jutta does have her hand up, but that was very helpful. Thank you, Sylvia, for jumping in.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think you covered it very well. There was one thought that I would like to add to what you presented, and that was that there is an ambivalence between the rights to freedom of expression and the rights that could be infringed by some types of content that were mentioned before, like extremist content and terrorist content. And we wanted to stress that with putting rights into the title, that we do see this ambivalence and would like to address it in both directions in the session.
Thank you, Jutta. That was another good point as well. Could I ask separately, maybe just in the Google Doc, everybody just put who worked on this particular document? You mentioned it in the chat room, but maybe everybody has editing rights to this document, right? So maybe at some point. Yes.
My name is Adama. MAC member, civil society organization. So I'm part of the group one, and then I was taking some of the notes, and then I just wanted to add to what Sylvia has already mentioned, some of the things that we're going to be dealing with under the content governance, human rights, responses, and responsibilities and risk. So some of the things that will be, the issues that will relate to this session will be extremism, violence content, and then will also regulatory, like regulatory approaches, and then also regulations that would guarantee content freedom of expression and prevention of freedom of religion. Those are some of the issues that we've also mentioned will be added to the descriptions regarding this team. Thank you for the floor.
Thank you, Adama. I just want to be clear, I think all the names that are up there in the speaking queue were from before the lunch break, right? Because they've been there for a long time. So I just want to make sure that there's not somebody who really is looking for the floor just now.
Can I just ask a small favor? It would be really appreciated that people log into their Gmail accounts with their names or something that is recognizable. Having comments coming from anonymous unicorns and others is really strange because you can't follow where it's going. So if that's okay with those that have access to their Google accounts, that would be really great. Thank you.
I think that's important. I mean, it's important for, obviously, for transparency as well of content. So, any other questions from MAG members for the working group? Thank you, Sylvia, Yuta, and Adama, everybody who jumped in with additional comments, because I think it helped really kind of flesh out the discussion. Group 2. Who's going to speak to Group 2? Ben?
Hello. So I'm going to basically read the text out, which you probably can't see on the screen because it's small. This is the paragraph and the title that myself, Maria, Ananda, Fanny, and Jennifer came up with over the last hour. Obviously, I would invite them to come in if they want to add anything to this presentation. We proposed the title, it's just slightly drawing on what I think you gave us when we came out of the morning session, expanding it a little bit to call it a multidisciplinary framework for policymaking in the digital age. We're not suggesting this is a final title. We didn't want to spend too much time going over the words of the title because we wanted to manage to get a paragraph too. So we provided a title and noted that it's a holding title for further refinement. And here is the description. There are many different approaches to internet governance, but as we heard from the UN Secretary General at IGF 2018, there are challenges to avoid working in silos and to create policy-making approaches that are truly multidisciplinary and involve a full range of perspectives and actors. What should be the perspectives, and which stakeholders and disciplines need to be considered? What ideas and examples can we look to help policymakers? Indeed, beyond public policy, what lessons from the private sector policymaking can be used? Companies are looking how to take account of perspectives and in some cases include external stakeholders in their decision making. This main session will look at a range of recommendations and case studies from different cultures and regions which could potentially illustrate some best practices to create more multidisciplinary approaches to internet governance policymaking. We could see this as a relevant place to mention and include discussion of the high-level panel. It might be the only main session where this is provides us an opportunity to do so. But we wanted to wait and see what the recommendations were before we tried to weave that into the proposal. So that's left in square brackets there as a note. So yes, you might want to check whether anyone else from our group has comments, but that's what we managed to come up with.
Fanny?
Well, first of all, there is one grammar mistake there in the last line. It says, but we want to wait, should be. So whoever is editing this text should remove the not on the last line of the group notes. because it's confusing. Yeah, I see someone is editing, hopefully. And secondly, I want to thank Ben for taking the lead on that, because his British sense of writing notes with his American spell checker were doing miracles. So I think we tried to, we had a long discussion, given the time that we had, but we had a long discussion on figuring out what exactly we want to do, and that's why we chose carefully the wording in terms of trying to bring together the to find out from different cultures and regions what's happening, because in some cases it's not necessarily that a whole region has unified policies, public policies in internet governance, but there are differences within the different cultures in the same region. So we hope that we'll be able to hear from folks who have examples of policy making, whether this is a multi-stakeholder or whatever their legislation process is. It still will be interesting to see how the different cultures in different regions, how they develop their internet public policies and in the digital age. So thanks again, Ben. I'm saying it second time so that he feels more uncomfortable now.
Thank you, Fanny. Any further comments from the working group members before we open it up to the MAG? Just one quick comment from me is we probably still need a separate HLPDC frontier session. I mean, so far the indications from the Secretary General's offices are actually looking for kind of a consultation sort of thing. So we need to see what that looks like. And, that's probably a main session just so it has the interpretation, given what it is. But I do think this is a substantive set of topics by itself, and I would like to make sure that we did these justice, and maybe we all achieve more if we actually had a kind of more focal consultation process for the HLPDCs. So obviously reference it where we think in the topic, but I'm not sure I would try and mix an HLPDC consultation in with the topic. What do the MAG members think or want to add, or Maria?
Just a reaction to what you just said. The idea of making this reference to the report of the HLPDC, it's only focusing in any aspect in the report that could cover something that is connected with this. It is not aiming to cover all the content that possibly have some kind of link with the topics of the IGF. It's only for that part because there was a specific reference from the General Secretariat last year in the opening of the IGF to the processes, and we think that in the report will be maybe a section covering this, and that part will be something that we could add in this proposal, but not the other aspects, just to clarify that.
That was my understanding from there, but I just really wanted to underline it as well. Any other comments, reflections? I thought what we would do is go through each one of them and then come back, I think, and take a view and say, well, how do we feel about these sort of six? And we can come back and revisit them individually if we need to. If there are no more comments or questions on that one, we'd go to group 3, which I think from memory was digital governance, digital trade. Carlos?
Yes, in group 3 we ended up with the title of Free Flow of Data and ICT Products in a Multipolar World. And our description is, this is a crucial point in time where data flows and ICT products are subject to scrutiny and the international trade is subject to discussion. Countries all over the world have begun to regulate the free flow of data and free trade. This main session should shed light on the following questions. How can we ensure free flow of data and ICT products in a multipolar world? What is the role of international bodies like WTO, OECD, WIPO, UNCTAD, and others? What are the applicable rules? Are there any conflicts of laws, extraterritorial effects of national actions, and how to solve them? What are the roles of bilateral or plurilateral trade agreements, and how to make sure the implementation of international rules is achieved? That's basically what we proposed.
Sorry, I was just taking a moment to actually read through the description since it just popped up on the screen there. Give everybody else a moment to do that as well. And ask if there are any other comments, contributions, further details from other working group members. I have to admit, I'm not sure that I would have thought that that was the title and the focal point from what the discussion was in the room earlier. But if that's where the group is with respect to this particular title, that's fine. If we think we're leaving something else on the table from the earlier discussion, this would be the time to say so. In particular, I guess I'm sort of looking to Daniela as well, since I think it was one of the first topics that you put up yesterday, in fact.
If you ask if I'm fine, yes, I'm fine, because I was part of the group. Maybe I just add, there was a discussion also about labor and human rights, and of course that touches, as this is cross-cutting, also this topic, but we decided that this is dealt in other groups mainly, and that's why we left that out, just maybe as an addition.
I think it looks like a very interesting session as well. I think I have Maria and then Jutta.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor again. I just want to point it out precisely to the last point that Daniela was mentioning, the need to make a link here with human rights consideration. Increasingly, trade negotiation and many of these things related with data touch in a more intensive way the way in which human rights can be exercised. And I think that not having any reference, even in the questions that are posed here, is problematic from the perspective that we talked before, that human rights should be something that it should be added in every aspect of the topic. And currently, it's something that is really very debated in each one of these forums. So it should deserve some place in the description and in the policy question, in my opinion. Thank you.
No, thank you, Maria. I was just catching up with the reading again as well. I mean, I do think, obviously, everything we do, I think the room here would like to be rights respecting. We need to ensure that that's kind of front and center. I suspect it would come up as well in respect to a lot of the processes, and particularly when we look at a lot of the organizations that there are, a lot of them are not as open as we would expect them to be, or the trade discussions and that sort of thing either. So I suspect some of those would probably come in the discussion itself, but it's a good point. Jutta?
Yeah, thank you for giving me the floor. I do think the description is very well thought through. I got the same feeling like Maria that the human rights aspect could probably be addressed in one of the questions, and I would like to volunteer to help phrase probably a question that addresses this issue. And for the possible title, I do think that the term ICT products sounds a bit strange to me, a little bit too like only tangible products, and these are also products that are kind of data only. So I just would like to see that maybe we can replace ICT products by something else, I don't know yet. So we can think about that. I'm not sure whether you had the intention to think only about tangible products. You Both. Okay. Then it might be possible to phrase it slightly.
ICT resources could be.
That's different. Let's maybe just leave that with the members for a moment. Think about it and go to Halani, who was in the queue and I think was part of your group as well from the list there. Halani, you have the floor.
Thanks. Thanks, Jutta and Maria. As one of the people in the group who brought up the human rights angle, I really strongly would suggest we have at least one question on human rights in the policy questions listed here. And on the wording of digital products, this is something else that Jutta is raising. Could we look at like the tag or WTO definitions? Because there is actually a definition for ICT related trade, which then has a products and services dichotomy. So you just use the global term that is generally used.
Lani, I think some of what you said wasn't clear. So perhaps there's something else that, and could we look at where there's action in the definition for ICT related? Maybe you can just look at the transcript and come back in or type it in the room if there's something helpful missing. In the meantime, let me go to Susan.
Thank you, Chair. So I think this stands to become a very interesting session, and I think a discussion about the conflicts of laws and interoperability of different legal regimes would be a neat part of the discussion. My only suggestion would be for the possible title, free flow of data and ICT products. I think in a multipolar world, if we could, the word multipolar seems a little bit kind of reductionist. So I think if we could consider replacing that within a digitally networked world, within an interconnected world, because I think we're talking about the free flow of data and products across more than just poles.
Sorry, so we can change that right now, change the multipolar. Was there any movement on ICT products? Just to capture the current state?
Probably at least products and services. ICT related products and services. Would that cover your... Not leaving out the data, of course, keeping the data and then...
I was just discussing with Rudolf because effectively we had a little bit of the discussion inside the group. We had first goods, and then Rudolf made the point that goods is a little bit unspecific, and then we came to ICT products. And if we now have services again, then maybe it's better to have ICT products and services, because it's goods and services normally in the trade debate. So I'm at least, I don't know, I'm looking to Carlos, for example. I would be fine with free flow of data and ICT goods and services in an interconnected world. For me, that's fine.
Oops, I see heads nodding around the room. And Kenton, you want the floor?
Sorry, I didn't use the queue, but I fully support what Daniel said. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's being updated in the document here. So if I remember what it was, it's free flow of data in ICT products and services in an interconnected world, something like that. So get the document updated and move forward. Any further comments, questions, reflections? Not seeing any, or not. Oh, Halani, are you back in the queue? Or is that an old hand?
That's an old hand. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Halani. And thank you for hanging in there and participating remotely as well. It's not easy. Okay, then let's leave that one and move on to the fourth group. If we can scroll up to the group 4 collection. And who's going to speak to that? Natasha?
Yeah, I will. Hello, everybody. Natasha Glover from Croatia. We were group 4, dealing with AI and data governance. And members of our group are Heikki, Serena, Sam, and Marinella. And we identified ethics and responsibility as keywords connected with this topic. And according to that, we propose a title of the possible main session as ethical AI prerequisites, responsible data governance and technology ecosystems. That would be one version, and the other one would be responsible data governance and technology design as prerequisite for ethical AI. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to prepare paragraph or two, but we prepared some policy questions. Few of them are here. What is ethical AI? What are parts of technology ecosystem? We tried to identify some of them, but of course, output of the main session would be that part of the ecosystem as our key speakers, keynote speakers would, and audience, of course, identified. Then we would like to present best practices of data governance. Then the next question is, what is the role of regulation in ensuring ethical AI? And a very important one for IGF perspective is, how can stakeholders work together to develop appropriate frameworks for responsible data governance? So that would be all from my side. If my colleagues had to add something, please.
Are there any other working group members that want to add? Thank you, Natasha. I just see that there's only one question in the document. Is it just that it hasn't been fully populated, or because I think your comments went further than the one statement that's there?
I think the Excel sheet is larger, so Natasha's comments are further to the right. They don't show up here, but they're actually in the document if you look at it on the computer.
Thank you. We'll find them, pull them in. Right. And that's under securing the internet. That's under IoT, right? I thought they were more under AI.
Excuse me. You might think of column G. If that's the case, that's the duplicate of the additional name proposal. So I'll fix it. I'll remove that field.
And then the next question is comments or reflections from MAG members on that particular grouping? Maria? Thank you, Maria, for jumping in here.
Thanks again for giving me the floor. I'm suspecting at this point that I'm going to reiterate the same comment in all the sessions, so you can have an idea of what I am going to say. Again, here's a place in which I would like to see the interconnection with human rights international standard. I understand that artificial intelligence poses very complicated and new questions from the ethical perspective, but those are not totally new for the framework of international human rights. So even if there is a mention later about the role of regulation that I like very much because it didn't stop the idea only with ethics, but go to the question of regulation, I would like to see in some way the question related with which kind of ethic we are looking for AIE also be connected with the international standards that are existent and are relevant to answer some of those questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Sorry. Any other comments or observations? Any reactions from the other working group members to Maria's comment? Maybe just take it on board in further discussions. Okay, we have two. We have Xiaofeng and then Ben.
Yes, for Internet of Things, security is very important, but at the same time, privacy also very important. So I don't know whether we can change the name, how to guarantee security and privacy. I think privacy may be more important than security for Internet of Things, because many person with several, maybe over 10 sensors in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xiaofeng. Ben, and then we'll come back to the working group members to see if there's any reflections on the questions that have been posed. Ben?
First, just to clarify, I think we're talking about AI, and maybe Xiaofeng's comments were related to the following topics, so we should definitely come back to those when we get to that one, that group. I think that human rights could be considered across the main sessions without necessarily having the name in the title, but a way to do it here could be, if we take the first of the two titles, it could be applying human rights and ethics to AI, responsible data governance and technology ecosystems. And if that helped, I think Kalani wanted to make sure that there was one main session that was about human rights. I think they should all look at human rights, but if it ended up that we had one main session that had the words in the title, maybe that would provide some comfort. So that was just a suggestion.
Yeah, I think for me the test is when people leave these sessions or leave the IGF, do they feel that human rights and rights respecting was a solid theme across what was being discussed, which, you know, honestly is, to me, paying more attention to make sure it's actually embedded in the policy questions and the topics and what we're trying to accomplish than per se in the title, which I think is really what Maria's pointing at. So I think we're in agreement there. Raquel, you have the floor? No. Raquel doesn't have the floor. Raquel doesn't want the floor. So that was AI. Any further comments or reflections? And there are more questions, and they are over in column G, as Natasha said, so they'll be pulled over and they'll be put all under there in that one section where we can see them more clearly. The next one is Group 5, Internet of Things. And Xiaofeng, I think your question was to the IoT, so you can bring it back in afterwards, but who wants to speak to Group 5, IoT? Thank you. Melinda.
Melinda Clem speaking for Group 5. I want to thank you, Lynn and the MAG, for inviting me to participate in this session. I appreciate it. For this session, we talked about the reality that the Internet of Things doesn't live at one layer of the Internet, and that is a complicating factor with security. So we thought that it would be a good idea to look at each distinct layer and have a stakeholder that can speak both to the security challenges for their discrete layer, as well as what happens to security as the service progresses between the layers. We think that a case study approach would be good here. And as one example, it would be best to have a couple that looked at different sectors. But one example was what happened with the DDoS attack with Dyn about 2 years ago, and when devices were turned and used for other purposes. Some of the specific security challenges that we wanted to be covered here were a lot of them had to do with how you update and what are the protocols for updating, whose responsibility that is. Is it a manufacturer? Is it a service provider? Is it the consumer? If it's the consumer, how is that consumer educated? And then obviously another important aspect was data, and how is data management offered? Is the user allowed to control the collection, broadcast, and storage of information? Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Any other working group members that want to comment or add to that? Was there anybody in the group who was familiar with the work on the Dynamic Coalition on the Internet of Things, or the Best Practice Forum, which is AI, Internet of Things, and big data? Because if not, it would be worth kind of running the next round of this discussion through those two groups and fully incorporate them. Any other comments from MAG members, or Xiaofeng, do you want to come back to your question, and then Ben?
Yes, actually IoT is my research area. So in this area, I know know this one very much. Just as I said, privacy is more than, maybe the threat of privacy is more than security. Because just like I said, in the near future, maybe within 10 years, each person maybe with more than 10 sensors. So privacy, more important. So I hope in this theme, we change the name, how to guarantee security and privacy. The theme important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xiaofeng. Thank you. Just reading the comments there. I think Raquel is in the queue, and then we'll come to Ben. Raquel?
Thank you very much, Lynn. Now it's my hand. So, just to comment on, to make a suggestion in terms of the approaches and the case studies that the group might be looking into the policy-making approaches at the domestic level, and Paul was with me in the other group, so I don't want him to be surprised, but with Canada, worked a really multi-stakeholder processes and effort within 1 year to arrive to recommendations on IoT security. They looked into 3 major aspects of network resiliency, the consumer protection aspects within the trust mark and labels, and the consumer education. So I think it's a valuable experience to bring along, and perhaps there are others that we can make inputs. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel. I think it's important to bring some of the other pieces of work in, as we said earlier, particularly through some of the BPF and DCs. Ben, you have the floor.
Thank you. So my suggestion or observation here is that if we wanted to have any of the main sessions which were going to look at the Paris call in any way, this might seem to be the most obvious place. Is there anything in the Paris call which provides guidance in how you can secure the Internet of Everything. I couldn't tell you whether the answers are in the Paris Call or whether it's relevant. I just observed that this seems to be the most relevant place if we want to have any main sessions that look at the Paris Call. Of course, I've already said we'll have the BPF, which will be considering the Paris Call amongst its work this year. And I know it wasn't quite close whether Group 1 might end up including the Paris Call, but I don't think, as I said before, the Paris Call is not about content, it's about securing the networks, and it looks to me like Group 1 is going down the road of content, which seems perfectly fine to me. So just a suggestion to take on board for that group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. When we finish, we'll go through 6 in a few moments. We'll go through the queue, go through 6, and then we might want to just come back up and maybe we can just see all 6 of the possible titles there, and then say, is there anything that we think is missing from the earlier conversations we had yesterday and today? I mean, Ben kind of just alluded a little bit to the security and cybersecurity. Is that something that people thought would have been addressed differently in a main session? Are we happy with what's there? And just an overall view as well. Going to the queue, we have Maria.
Thank you, Chair, again. My question goes to the point that there is already a session from the proposal that was identified by the group, the working group that I was taking part, the security and safety group, that it has very good policy questions that may overlap a lot with what I'm reading here. So my suggestion would be like to furtherly refine what we want to achieve with this main session, look into how it's overlapping with what already we have selected as one of the work stream session in the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I think that's probably a step we need to do with all of these. Is the next step is go back and look at the workshops that have been approved in the streams and just make sure we're kind of complementing or building on them. Sylvia.
Silvia Cadena, Internet Technical Community. To the risk of being repetitive and annoying to several people here, I really hope that people can add the comments to the document with their names. There is someone adding comments to the Group 1 that apparently was not a member of the working group and is adding things about internet addiction that were not discussed in the group. If we are working on a Google document to capture the discussions on the working group, other things that were not part of the working group and that have not been discussed should not be added there as if it was part of the working group. So I guess if we are agreeing on a way of doing things, we should follow it. So please watch your groups as well. There is other comments coming that have nothing to do with what you are saying, sir.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think that's an important point. It's an important point not only for kind of transparency, but also for follow-up for the good points. Melinda, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to make an observation. It sounds as though over the last day that there's a lot of repetition, specifically in this IoT area, both with dynamic coalitions and best practices forum. Maybe the complication here was the gathering of both IoT and cybersecurity. If that's the case, it could be, it could be more beneficial to pull the IoT aspect out of it and just look at the cybersecurity dimension.
Or vice versa. No, I think I'm just very aware that there were a best practice forum, of course, in that area. And the same comment would have gone for a lot of the other ones. There's a dynamic coalition on trade, for instance, and we've got other ones that are focusing on data and focusing on human rights. And so there's a lot of DCs that I think we all need to take into account and look at as we progress these. And then, of course, we do have the BPF work. And we need to find a process to actually engage the NRIs as well, so the NRIs know what we're doing in terms of developing here, and that they actually have the opportunity to kind of augment and integrate whatever messages are key. That's something we made a point of really trying to facilitate last year, and I think we want to facilitate it again this year. And I know that they all want to ensure that their sessions are complementary to the rest of the sessions in the annual meeting program and not redundant. So the more information we can give them and the earlier, the stronger the entire neighborhood will be. The whole program will be. So yeah, let's just keep that open for, they're all open for a moment, but I think that was one of the ones that maybe it's either maybe one or the other depending on where the room wants to go. But thank you for all the very good work in this small group, I think it was.
Thank you, I really appreciate it. I am going to have to leave soon, so thank you, and I'll see you soon.
So it's not offensive, the comments, it's planes. Working group 6. Who wants to speak to 6? And if we could move up to the last working group. Oh, sorry, Chennai, okay. Thank you, Chennai, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was in the working group 6, and after a very much exciting discussion, we came up with the proposed session title, which is Achieving the SDGs in the Digital Age. So the proposed session will be focusing on SDGs by addressing issues of achieving digital transformation, addressing the issue of the unconnected, and discussing policy gaps and providing policy guidelines. The main session, of course, will be a high-level discussion with the high-level participants. We'll be taking advantage of those who would have been invited by the German government and by the German parliament. And we will also have selected participants to respond to the issues that have been raised in terms of achieving the SDGs. The discussants will be people who will be bringing in, or stakeholder group representatives who will be bringing in their lived experiences, such as youth, people with disabilities, as well as people representing the gender perspective. The session aims to actually come out with action points for the high-level panelists that they will be working on in their specific regions. To make it interactive, we will also propose, the proposed discussants will be responding to what the high-level participants would have stated, so that sort of in a way of holding them accountable and also sharing their own experiences towards achieving SDGs. We actually, prior to the session, hope to draw questions from the different stakeholder groups that may be posed to the high-level panelists by the moderator that will be selected. And we really hope to get a really good moderator for this session. I invite my other colleagues on the group to comment on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chennai. Any other comments from the working group members? Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Just to add to what Chennai covered, and she covered it very well. Our thoughts around the session was really trying to highlight that without digital inclusion, if we don't achieve digital inclusion, then we're not going to achieve the SDGs. So they're interlinked. And there's a hope that we will have some government participation, and we want them to go home with a message. So even if this is the only workshop they go to, they realize the importance of digital inclusion and that they have to do something. And this doesn't apply everywhere, but you know, where I come from, the Global South, it's very pertinent that our government start to look at digital inclusion and actually achieving it rather than just talking about it, because it does impact the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Maybe could you or somebody else say a little bit about the title then, because if I remember correctly, it was almost as though the title was backwards. SDGs first, whereas what you just reflected was digital inclusion is critical to the development of the SDGs, which would, I think, maybe echo some of the points Dennis made earlier around the purpose of this forum versus all the SDG activities within the United Nations, and of course with the SDI forum and WSIS forum and that sort of thing. So I don't know if I remember the title correctly or not.
The title that we've parked, and I say it's not cast in stone, is Achieving the SDGs in the digital age. And we did talk about having digital inclusion or digital transformation in the title, but we thought it would be better not to have that there. And that was a discussion that we had, but it's not cast in stone. But right now it's achieving the SDGs in the digital age, which sort of now clashes with Ben's title, because now we have 2 workshops talk with digital age. So there's something for thought.
Okay, any other comments, or, I mean, Dennis, any reflections as well? Anyone on the pitch that was here?
No,
Dennis?
I joined the discussion in the group, so I think that was a good discussion, and this was the outcome. Yeah.
Miguel?
Thank you, Lynn, for giving me the floor. Miguel Candia for the record. I just wanted to first thank everybody in the group, because there was a very fruitful and very nutritive discussion to get to this product, I would say, and wanted to just add to what Paul just explained to us, that I think the title has a content and an idea that is very well intended, in the sense that what we are trying to focus is that in achieving the SDGs, internet governance plays a fundamental role, because good internet governance policies will accelerate the achieving of or the achievement of the SDGs, and the idea of the SDGs is, inclusive, leaving no one behind, those further behind first, and so on and so forth. So we are actually giving an input to the main product, basically, of the UN system by now, that is guiding all efforts in every country. So that's basically the idea of behind this phrasing. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are all still old hands in the queue there, right? So I think there's still actually, Raquel?
It's just a quick comment, also a suggestion to include the CNB work into this main session, not to start from the zero, but building on the 4 years of the past intersessional work in the IGF. Thank you.
I think there's still a slight disconnect for me personally with the title, because I don't see this room as responsible for achieving SDGs. We're responsible for doing a lot to facilitate activities, policy making, the ICT space to support them. It's not something I'm strong at, but when I saw it and I saw it reversed, it just felt like kind of the reverse of what the earlier discussion in the room was. But I think, with all of these, we have to continue kind of fleshing them out and continue to revisit the descriptions and the titles. I think at this point, I want to do 2 things. I mean, Daniela actually needs to leave at 5, so I want to make sure we give her some time at the end for some comments. But I want to see if between now and sort of 10 minutes to 5, I guess, we can figure out what the next step is in this. So we have these 6 main session proposals, and we had the 7th one, which is some sort of HLPDC or frontier issues kind of session. How do people feel about them when they look at the 6? Is it kind of a reasonable set? Is there anything missing? Is something overdone? Are they areas we feel with the start we have here today that we could go away and build on in the next week or 2? Ultimately, this turns into an exercise where the people that are involved in the working group need to take responsibility for the full session. Just like every other workshop organizer and all the workshop proposals you revisited, it's taking responsibility for the session. The speakers, the panelists, the moderators, the theme, the context, the orientation, the reporting, rapporteurs, So that's the work we want to, we need to advance this work enough so that that other work can continue, you know, frankly, over July and August. With, by the third week of June, I think was the Secretariat's desire, we had working titles. I mean, the titles can always change slightly later, but working titles that we would put in the program and a very brief program description as well, so that when they put the full program up, this is kind of equally populated. So I don't know how we want to go back. And, oh, and by the way, some of the notes here don't all show up under, so we just need to make sure that's fixed for like 6. And one of the other ones that was over in another column, just make sure it's there so we can all look in the same place for them. Is there a way, Eleanor, to collapse any of these so we see the 6 possible titles in one? I'm not actually sure who's driving the screen at the moment. So then the question is, how does the room feel about these 6 main sessions? Are they covering, not covering, gaps, still too many? I'm sure there's lots of questions on the content, which is, you know, have we, because people would not have had time to go back and look in any depth at the workshop proposals and the policy questions that are there. We obviously have a lot of knowledge in the room and in the working groups because of the work we just finished with that process, but I still think a more kind of robust check is appropriate. Plus there's the DCs, the BPFs, and the NRIs that we all want to engage with as well. Paul Brown, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that it's probably a bit early to pass too much judgment. I think if we're determined that we're going to have all of these main sessions, then we just need to have a set of guidelines that we all understand, that we build the main sessions around. And I think we all understand those, but I think it should be documented in any case, you know, because we don't want to replicate workshops, and some of what we see there is replicating some workshops. So maybe if the working groups that have now been formed have some time over the next couple of weeks, maybe before the next call, to form a better proposal that can be presented and then forwarded before the call and then discussed at the next call.
Thank you, Paul. Let me ask those, there are a couple people in the room that are very close to the workshop guidelines, the main session guidelines that were developed in past years. And you know who you are. Do you think that that process as documented is appropriate? I know Sylvia is actually saying that she hopes we continue to use that. Do we still think that that's a reasonable document? Does it need to be updated for anything? Because the next step would be, of course, to ask the working groups to go away and begin populating those documents, which would give us, presumably they have all the information we need to continue to evaluate and improve on these. That would also give us consistency across the presentations, which makes it a lot easier to go through them. Do we think that that document is okay as the next step? Is it appropriate to ask? And we need to come back to kind of working groups and populating them, but is it appropriate as the next step to ask the groups to go away, use those main session guideline documents to take the next turn on this? Susan?
Thank you, Lynn. I think I don't have it in front of me, so I might need to dust it off and take a look. But I think it will serve as a solid foundation. So if you could just give us some time. But I think that would be a good way to move forward.
Yes, Mary Rose, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just Rose from the private sector. Just want to comment that this comment on how can we ensure, like on the row under the group notes, how can we ensure free flow of data and ICT products is not our notes. It was like rearranged earlier when the rows and columns were merged. So it can be confusing if we include that notes under our group 6. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so we need to clean up the current spreadsheet and get it consistent, and I think maybe Eleanor can help do that as long as the working groups actually have put the right content in. So if through the discussion here in the room you want to update your content, just make sure it's updated and that Eleanor is aware of it, and then she can make sure it's sent out to the MAG appropriately. Tamea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the groups who have worked on this. I think it's a pretty good roster, so thanks to everyone for the quick and good work. Just one point I wanted to make. Although I was late to the Group 6, I was also part of it. I don't see my name, so if there's going to be mailing lists or communication for the group, I just want to make sure that I'm part of that, because I think we have a really good group, so it'd be great to work more together. And another question I had is, how are we working now with the other main sessions proposed by the other constituencies? Are they going to be asked to see if they want to take part in these, or will they have that option, or are we considering them standalones? I'm not sure if the teams have already been selected for them or not. Just a question of how are we doing that. Thank you.
No, thank you, Tamea, and I did try and cover that a few minutes ago, but we'll go through it. It's fine, just to make sure that we're not forgetting about it, and it's not an afterthought either. Just one quick comment, checking the chat room. There's quite a number of good comments in the chat room from Helani and Henriette as I was just scrolling through quickly. So let's make sure we just pick those up and that the working group is aware of them as they go forward. I'm sort of forgetting who's in which one of the working groups, so they may even bend from those working groups. So where I think we've got now is we've got this document in front of us, which has some kind of working titles or draft titles. We have some kind of description and some policy questions. I think we need a specific, either we say we're using, and maybe Sylvia, I don't know, we say we're using the current main session, we're using last year's main session guidelines document, or we give people 2 days to look at it and turn around and spin on it. That's one question. If you have a view on it, I'd like that. I'd like Susan to hear the answer, because I'm asking Sylvia what she thinks about the last year's main session guidelines document, so we can figure out how quickly we can turn that around and get a document out that everybody can work with.
Well, the main session guidelines were fairly simple. They had a good flow with the reporting mechanisms after for the online gathering of all the reporting and the main messages and all of that, and that is already in the system. The guidelines that do not go into what is the content, it's just what fields is that we are collecting. So I really don't think that we need to reinvent a whole new template for it. It's fairly basic. And it will not be scored or reviewed in that sense, so I don't think that is necessary. What might be useful will be to send that template to the MAG list with the agreement in this room about the different approaches, for example, to focus on the policy questions before jumping into speakers, for example. I don't know, something a little bit more practical in terms of process. And the comment that you made about that if we sign on to do this, we are responsible to actually bring the session to a good port, safe and secure at the other end, and deliver it, which is the very difficult part. So the document is one page or a couple of pages for guidelines that were from previous years and was reviewed, and then the template is already in the system. So if we can use that will simplify the work for the Secretariat, and also, I don't think we need to reinvent it, but open to use.
Thank you, Sylvia. Susan, do you have a quick view?
Yeah, just nobody's suggesting we reinvent it. I just want to take a look at the document, make sure that there are just minor changes that might need to be made, but the substance of it should remain fit for purpose. Thanks.
And the one thing I'd like to make sure is in the document is a really substantive enough focus on policy questions or being really clear as well on what it is we want the session to achieve or to accomplish. I know we spent a lot of time in the workshop proposals this year making that even more clear. So if we can just make sure that's reflected. Is it just Susan, or is there anybody else that wants to work with Susan quickly on turning that document around so everybody has it by like no later than the weekend? Paul Rowney said he would, okay. So Paul and Susan, if you could just take and Sylvia and Raquel. And if we could just get that out, and Natasha. I mean, I'm sure as well that it's very, very close. I think taking a good look at it would be helpful, but whatever you all think is a working group, I think if you just put it out directly to the MAG, we don't need another kind of spin through the MAG for a review. So just quickly, because I want to get to Daniela. So I think what we're saying for the next steps is we have these 6 draft main sessions with draft titles and draft notes. We've said for virtually all of them, we need to go away and look at the workshop proposals that were accepted, maybe even some of those that weren't accepted if there were critical policy questions that we think should be pulled in. We want to look through the DCs, and I don't mean we just kind of look through the DCs, but I think we ought to get a process together. Maybe the Secretariat can help us with this, so that the DCs are aware of what we're doing in all these sessions and that they're invited to come in and participate and review and contribute where possible as well, so that there's a two-way look at each other's sets of work, if you will, to make sure we're pulling those pieces together appropriately. It's the same thing for the BPFs, and we need a process with the NRIs as well, so that the NRIs have kind of full visibility into what we're doing here, and likewise we're working with them on their sessions as well, so that, again, I know everybody, absolutely everybody, wants to make sure this is a really good, solid, complementary, value-adding process that builds on all the previous work. Nobody's looking to do something that's redundant or, so I think if we can build those processes to ensure that we're doing that, the whole program will be a lot stronger. But that's going to require the Secretariat, I think, to step up and help drive those processes between what's here in the MAG and what's in each one of those intersessional activities and what's in the NRI processes as well. But I know that's what you all do, you know, all the time anyway, so that shouldn't be an issue. We have no future calls scheduled, I think. I'm sort of thinking we might be well off having a call towards the second part of next week, because the week after that is Eurodig, which takes a number of people out, plus we start to get awfully late to the deadline the Secretariat's giving us. I'll ask Chengetai to come look at that and suggest some times for a follow-up meeting, but I would suggest that probably the only agenda item on it is the review and preparation of this main session set of activities. And again, I just want to remind everybody the timetable we're working towards, as the Secretary has said, by the end of the 3rd week of June, they would like a working title. Again, there can be some changes downstream, and a paragraph or so to put in the schedule when that moves forward. We do need specific working groups, and we need to have co-facilitators identified for each one of these main session working groups as well, so that the Secretariat knows who to ping in to follow up with at key points of the process. I'm going to put this question out there, and then I want to turn to Danielle so she's got plenty of time, is we need to figure out how we establish the working groups. Do we go forward with the working groups as they kind of evolved here? Or were people just stepping into groups because these were the groups and they were in the room and some were underrepresented? We need to think through what that process looks like a little bit. I don't think we need to over-process it, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Because then the last item we want to do today, I think, is maybe just quickly go through kind of topping, tailing the ad hoc reporting process, because I think that's what ties this whole program together, and we'll do that in the last hour. And actually, we've still got a few other little hanging things, but if we don't get to them, we can get to them on the list. So I want to just thank. I want to thank Daniela before she leaves again for Germany's fantastic hosting of this meeting here, and of course all the just superb support we're getting for the IGF process. I mean, it's just it's really exciting. Feels a little bit like a breath of fresh air to have had the time to do this, because the time of your appointment of the MAG, to have the fantastic support, to have the early announcement of the host, it's really just, I think, enabled us, and I think we can see it in the process here, really enabled us to, you know, to step up the game a little bit. So I'm just very appreciative, and I want to thank you, and thank you for all the time you've spent here as well. I know it's an incredibly busy week given other events in the world. So thank you, and the floor is yours, Daniela.
Thank you so much, Lynn. In fact, it's a pleasure working with all of you, so I really appreciate that. I appreciate that you have been coming to Berlin, and I really hope that you enjoyed it as well. Maybe just very few words, a little bit summing up what I take away from the meeting. I think we really made progress on the program. I think it's a really well-structured program coming thinking about newcomers. We talked about addressing new groups, integrating others who haven't been to the IGF. I think it's important that we made that effort to make it easier for them, I think, to get an overview what the IGF is and what kind of discussions are going on. I think it was a very good idea to have these topping and tailing sessions. I take away that for the topping sessions, there shall be sort of an introduction of the working stream that will come. And we saw that the interesting flows through the themes yesterday. I think that's also important. And then for the tailing sessions, or the wrapping up sessions, it will be important, in my view, that we have a good that we have rapporteurs that are really going with the work streams through the days, and then in the end they will really report what we have done during the week, what they have learned, what are the takeaways, not in the sense that there must be consensus all the time, but just summing up what has been discussed, and maybe where was consensus and where are still different views, and what has been discussed. And as we then have the final wrapping up session, it is clear that all the three work streams will come together, making sure that, of course, they are all interlinked, and then in the end, I'm sure we will show that there are cross-cutting issues. And continuing the main sessions, I also think that we really made good progress today. I have the feeling that this is a well-balanced program. I think it really is important that we will have a slot, an important slot for the discussion of the high-level panel at the beginning, and that's in a sort of a frontier issue. I think that's a good idea, and then we have a good mixture from today. Also cross-cutting issues that are maybe filling also gaps, because we shouldn't have redundancies in the program, that's for sure, but I think the main sessions we have discussed today are really adding something to the program, and I think that's important. So in my view, this will be very interesting IGF. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing all again then in November at the Estrel. Unfortunately not in this building, because this is not big enough, as we expect at least 3,000 people there. We have to go a little bit, it's not outside of Berlin, you know, Berlin is a very big city, so it's still inside Berlin, but it's a little bit more to the border of Berlin, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I thank you all very much for the constructive work, and see you soon then. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And it just gives people the opportunity to see a little bit more of beautiful Berlin.
Yeah.
It's really funny, if you fly into DC and you get on those little people mover buses, there's a voice that comes on and says, it makes it a benefit. I hope you appreciate that you're being protected from the elements while you're being moved from one point of this airport to another fantastic point of the airport, and allows you to see, you know, sunlight after your journey. It's just, you know, it's just, you know, it's 200 people crammed into a small metal tube driving across the tarmac. But it's not actually that far out, and as we've been told, it's great transportation, and so I don't think we should focus on that.
Yeah, no, that should be easy because public transportation in Berlin usually, maybe except for some thunderstorms like yesterday, but it usually is very good in Berlin, so that shouldn't be any problem. And everyone who is coming will get a free ticket for public transportation for the whole week.
Thank you very much, and have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Lovely weather. So what Susan had just sent the topping and tailing document that she and Natasha and Maria and Timea had gone away to pull together on the basis of the discussion the MAG had yesterday. And I think in my quick kind of review, they did a good job. I'd like to, if they don't mind, walk through it quickly because I think it helps to kind of cement this whole process and what we're doing in place a little bit. So I've asked Eleanor, I think, if she can get it prepared for, which you may not have seen yet in the WebEx chat room, for display, but you do all have it in your mail as well. So Susan, maybe you could just, in terms of time, even just kind of, Susan, Timea, Maria, or Natasha, just quickly do an introduction and maybe just talk about the what you're proposing. And then again, I think you did a good job capturing the discussion in the room yesterday for the topping session. And then we'll take some comments on that. We can come to the tailing after. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I just sent a link to the Google Doc. So I don't know if we're able to put it on the screen, but in any event, I'm very happy to just describe it here. So the purpose of the topping session would be to set the scene for the week on each particular theme. So by providing IGF attendees with an orientation of the week's planned activity in relation to that theme. Specifically, the session would cover the theme's narrative, outline several sub-themes or areas that are within that theme, and perhaps there could be a discussion of some policy questions, but the idea is not to set that policy question in advance, but to just more so look at the sub-themes and to give attendees something to think about as they go throughout the week, as they sit through this theme. I've also included in the document suggestion for kind of an energizing speaker to speak to the themes, to set the scene. And then finally, I think it would be useful to create a space for workshop previews where workshop organizers can choose to, and not all workshop organizers might be able to attend, but if workshop organizers or participants want to choose to preview their workshop under specific sub-themes. So if you had, for example, in digital inclusion, we have access and infrastructure sub-theme. We have a youth inclusion sub-theme. We have some jobs as a sub-theme. And so if workshop organizers under each of those sub-themes wanted to give a preview of their workshop, just very brief, maybe even a minute long, then there could be discussion or questions asked on that. And then we would wrap up with a conclusion by one of the MAG members who's involved in that working group. So the structure is overall, it's meant to be able to get people kind of primed and ready and interested and excited about the program for that specific theme over the course of the week. And so I will leave it to Maria or Timea to address the tailing session. And we might want to consider giving these sessions more generic names, because as I understand it, topping and tailing relates to washing babies. Yep. So, but also vegetables. It depends where you are in the world, so. Okay.
Are there any further comments on this front end of the process? We do need to find, obviously, a better name for the. Any further? Let me just see if there's any further comments from the the 4 folks that worked on this document, to see if there's, and then see if the MAG members have any kind of comments on it. We'll keep it open. We'll keep it open for comments for a few more days, but I think just to give people a sense of the flow we're trying to work within here in the schedule. I guess the only thing that sort of came into my mind when I was looking at this is maybe rather than asking the workshop organizers to preview their workshops, maybe it's a preview of what's happening in those sub-themes or something, which is still a little more detailed, but not a long parade, because it'd still be 20-odd people if they all did, and I think it's hard to do anything substantive in that, but that would also, I think, make it clear that we're trying to look at these pieces in the flow. So, Mary Rose, you have the floor. Using the cue, because I can't often see whose hand it is down there.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I would like to commend Susan, Timea, and Maria for putting the topping and tailing sessions together. I really like the flow and the concept of it. I'm just wondering if we can, at least at the end of the topping session, there's like a takeaway for the participants. And I was thinking about if we are doing a pre-event survey, are we already doing that? And maybe that's the best time for us to give that survey to them. I know, I understand that we should go digital, but based on my experience, if we go digital and survey, only less than 3% people will respond to the survey, especially if they are back at their work. So if we can hand them a printed survey form that we can distribute to them, and they will give us back during the tailing session in exchange for something like a free stuff. Like, let's admit it, who else doesn't like free stuff, right? So this is just like a suggestion, if we can have a takeaway for them. And I'm also wondering if we have like a mobile app for the program where people can create their schedule, and the topping session will give them the idea on what's the flow of the sessions that they want to attend, and that's, I think, the best time to introduce to them the mobile app on how they can schedule the sessions that they want to go on the next 3 days. I hope we have a mobile app for the program. And please allow me to mention also my suggestion on the reporting session, because I think we are on the flow of concretizing the flow of our program. On the reporting session, I know that there was a template for the synthesis by the reporters, and I want to share my experience during the Internet Freedom Forum that we do. We have an Etherpad for the documenter to fill in the template, and it's easier to synthesize afterwards. So all the information on the Etherpad will go through like a consolidated form by maybe whoever is the assigned person to consolidate that. Then it's easier to synthesize for the tailing session. I can share the link of the sample Etherpad that we use in the IFF, and we can just incorporate the template that we have already that you've been using for the past IGF. Those are just my suggestions, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for your suggestions. We'll see how we can implement all of them. We'll discuss it with the group and with the host country. For the mobile app, there will be one, and it's going to be based on the sketch. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, except for Tamara and Sylvia, but yes. Yes, sketch, yeah.
Depending if you're pronouncing it schedule or schedule.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yes, so it will be there, and it will be available via the Apple Store and Google Play as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Chengetai. Is there any more questions on the front end of these workshop tracks? Then could I ask somebody to walk through the back end of the tracks, the tailing session? Tamea?
Thank you. I see people already editing the document, so I like the proposition for wrap-up session, just thinking about it. So, but for lack of a better word, so far I'm going to refer to the tailing session. So what we talked about with Maria and Susan for this is to prepare already through the tailing session a way of reporting out from the tracks. So we thought about how to best do that. It's quite a consistent description here, so I'll try to be brief. But the whole aim for the end session would be to distill the conversations from the 3 tracks, and also to include not just the workshops, but to reach out to all the other sessions that happen through the IGF that have a link to the certain track. So that would include the BPFs that have relevance to either of the 3, the NRI session, the dynamic coalition session, even main session. So any other, the open forums as well. So those who feel they have been part of a certain track to be able to also report back from there. And with this, we hope to provide a holistic sort of 360 view on the topics discussed, and capture those without creating a situation where we negotiate a solution or a particular message, but rather give a concise summary of what was raised throughout the week. So we would ask session organizers that in preparation for the end session to already think about how they're reporting out. And we really liked the last year's approach of having a short and a long summary for each session. We would ask that the short summaries be sent to the Secretariat and shared with the organizers of the end sessions as soon as possible after workshop is ended. So hopefully by the end of the day or before the session. And the short summaries, in our view, should include what were the policy questions that were discussed in that session, the different aspects of the policy issue that came out during the session, including social, economic, technical, legal, governance aspects. The most compelling elements that came out from those sessions, and that would mean also case examples, good practices, questions and challenges, any new solutions or issues that the workshop or the session brought up, and then also to capture some of the proposed actions or next steps that the session participants were talking about or promised to take. And therefore we would hope that each session organizer allows a couple of minutes at the end of the session to where the rapporteurs and the moderators would work together to distill some of these ideas out that could be then included into a short 2-3 paragraph short summary. And at the tailing session itself, we would see this reporting back, but not in a long queue of one session after the other, but to take the same format that was at the topping session and talk about the reports and the outputs in the working groups that would be organized in the sub-themes or the thematic tracks or sub-tracks, or I don't know how to call them, but you know what I mean. And then in order to report back in a concise manner from each of the 3 tracks, the messages from the breakout groups would then be incorporated into a report for each track, and that would be the report from the track. And that could then go into my initial idea to see how would those messages from the breakout groups could be incorporated under the policy buckets. So that's our thinking so far. We're looking forward to hearing from you if you'd like it, if you have other suggestions. And one note that we mentioned that was, I think, proposed by Daniela yesterday, that there are artists or graphic designers who are creating flowcharts or word bubbles or maps or mind maps or whatever as sessions are unfolding. I think it would be a really fun idea to bring those out, depending on how the resources go. But if not, at least creating perhaps a word bubble. There are apps already that are doing that, conference apps that could be working. And I think it would be fun if we link back to Rose's idea, if we do a word map in the beginner session, and then a word map at the ending session, and see how those compare. Thank you.
No, thank you, Timea. I think there are a lot of good discussions there, and I think Daniela's sort of idea of it is more like a mind map, but it's one of those really graphic kind of pictogram kind of things. Let me see if there are any comments on this. I want to come back to a couple of the pieces in more depth, but just see if there's any general discussions, observations first. So I think one of the things that I think would be really helpful, I think we need to think a little bit more about the chart that's at the bottom and how we make it helpful. I mean, not just X was mentioned, but I mean, it needs to be, where we're talking about the ideas and things, it needs to be, you know, something which is more substantive in terms of than I think a lot of the reporting has been in the past. So I think we need to think about that a little bit more until we actually take it the next step where we can say, this is who ought to be thinking about this or concerned about this, or these are places we could bring it, or something. But it needs to be something that I think kind of indicates that there's, you know, a next step to the discussion. So maybe we can think about some samples with respect to what we would actually capture in some of those boxes. What I'd like to see is if there was a support for, and then the MAG takes so much time, following, of course, all the time that the submitters put into putting in these workshop proposals and putting together a really good program, as do, of course, all the open forums, the DCs, BPFs, NRIs, et cetera. I don't mean to exclude anybody, and I don't know if we need to include them all the time. And I certainly should have included open forums when I said earlier when we're actually looking at what we're doing with these main sessions too, to make sure we're looking broadly at all organizations. But if when we pull these together, I think there could be a really sort of substantive document that says, you know, the IGF looked at digital inclusion. We had this framework. There was this flow. There were these kind of sessions and points made, and but something, everybody holds up the WSIS report and says it's a great report. You know, the WSIS report is basically everybody's prepared speech is bound in a glossy cover. And everybody says we need outcomes, we need outcomes. We have so much information in the IGF, but I think, as we've all said before, it's not packaged particularly well. I'm actually wondering if there's a way to get a small number of rapporteurs, and I guess it would need 8 or 10 of them or something, that could follow each one of these themes or tracks or workshops so that we had a consistent reporting style. We had kind of a consistent view of the discussions that were brought up, and actually prepare a document at the end of the IGF says this is, the substantive discussions that took place at the IGF. I'm not talking about recommendations or conclusions, but something fairly substantive. And one of the models that actually keeps coming in my mind is some work that I've seen Samantha Dickinson do. The work that she does, and some of that's a little bit different because they start with very formal council documents, and there's discussions on council documents, and things move in and move out, and but something more substantive than just aggregating the messages at the end, with people who really understand the topics, understand the IGF, understand the multi-stakeholder community. Because if we could walk around afterwards and say, this is the data governance set of discussions we had at the IGF. This is the, digital inclusion. And I think it would be a really impactful, I know isn't a word, way of kind of categorizing the work that actually happened at the IGF and showing the substantive expert discussions that go in. So there's obviously, I'm interested in whether or not that's of interest, and then if it is, of course, then there's funding and resources for it. I'm hoping we have a couple of different options there, and I know in the past we've had journalists and various people come in. We've had people from policy programs in schools, and maybe there's even some other resources or something that we can kind of tap and direct. But any thoughts on what else we could do? This was part of what we were going to take up in that ad hoc working group, the ad hoc MAG working group we were going to establish, but any initial reactions? I sometimes feel like I really fail at phrasing these questions somehow, or I've gone too far and said too much, or said not enough. But I think my intent is to, without having to go away and take 6 months afterwards, after the fact, capture what happened there in a substantive way without, again, going into negotiated text or recommendations. Or I think Dennis wants the floor, and I think Mary's contemplating taking the floor, but maybe not. Dennis, you have the floor.
No, I just want a clarification question actually to all of us. I think I missed the discussion yesterday, that part, but we will be getting a report from the workshop organizers for each session, right? Which helped us last year tremendously to prepare these IGF messages for each main session. So that's something I think Ananda is planning to coordinate this year with German government. So that work is still there, but what you are asking is, in addition to that, a more thematic discussion summary. Is that right?
Yes, we are still expecting the same level of reports from the workshops, and I'm sure we will still have the formal, UN chair summary. But I was looking for a more thematic, kind of community-based view of the discussions that took place in the IGF. So yes.
Hello. Sorry, June. Going back to your remark about rapporteurs doing sort of the same kind of format, I'm thinking that we really need to have the same source. If we're going to have those sort of rapporteurs, we need to have them from the same source. And is it Dennis? He just mentioned something like that just before I could say it. Because you can't bring them in from different groups and expect them to do the same thing. They have to be trained up to do the same thing. But I agree with it. It's a good idea.
No, I think resourcing it will be something we need to be quite thoughtful about, so that they know the topics, know the community, know the kind of multi-stakeholder nature, so that we make sure that, frankly, that kind of permeates the thematic reporting. I have Yuta, and then I'm not sure if I have Mary or not, but Yuta, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Lynn, for giving me the floor. First of all, I would like to say I think that's a great idea to improve the reporting by rapporteurs that are appointed to the tracks. With regard to the workshop reports that were produced by the workshop proposers or organizers, I do think we need to update that a bit because it was based on last year's form, and especially pay attention to the policy questions and what came out of discussion of these policy questions. But going back to the rapporteurs, somehow I agree with what June said. They need to have the same basic information. I'm not sure whether they completely need to be familiar with all what internet governance means. It could also be that they have a certain amount of professionalism for journalism, for example, because if you have a journalism education, you know how to approach a topic, you know how to do your research and then to write something. And with regard to resources, I would suggest that we probably approach some of the journalist schools that we have in Germany, and some of them are based in Berlin. So that could be an opportunity to bring in young people, not the very young, but young journalists who have the journalist education and who probably it would be beneficial for both sides.
Actually, we have been contacted by one of the journalist schools already. They are planning to cover the IGF without any mandate, just for themselves, but perhaps we could get into a dialogue and see what comes out of it.
Thank you, Jutta and Rudolf, and I do agree with your points in terms of doing that as well. We might also be able to put kind of a lightweight steering committee over each one of those thematic groups, because we had the thematic working groups that actually put together the proposal and the track and reviewed them in the first place. So maybe there's a body that could help both in terms of upfront orientation and even kind of steering and tracking of the messages afterwards. Because I think we all know how to manage a lot of these conversations that are responsible to all parties and give the flavor of what multi-stakeholder internet governance discussions and processes are like. So it might be another way to provide a little bit of support to that. Maria, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Maria Paz Canales, Civil Society. I'm just concerned about this idea. I mean, I think that it's very compelling, the idea of having something that is more structured and allows us to have a quicker sense of what are the main things that we heard during the days of the IGF. But I am really concerned about how does not end in a moderation of the content that will be driven from those conversations in a way that could be later perceived as too much influential in the curation of that content that finally it's raised. I think that maybe that can be partially addressed by the idea of having these students that will be more neutral and hopefully well trained in doing objective journalism. But I am a little bit hesitant in considering that will be the final solution for this, because we were trying to put a lot of effort in the way in which we presented the topic untailing session flow in a way that it's clear that we are not providing a recipe, but we are providing a set of options that are based in what was heard in the different discussion. So I think that, again, coming back to the point that IGF place is a place for surfacing that knowledge and trying to find a new creative way to address the issues, but not provide a set in stone recipes. And I am concerned that this proposal of this type of reporting could lead a little bit more to that impression. Maybe it's not the intention, but could be considered in that way by external actors. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I hear your concern. I think what, in my mind, the proposal is to try and kind of factually capture the discussions that were held and the context of the narrative we defined and the stream we built that says this is kind of the context of the discussions that were had at the IGF. Not that we really cast anything in stone, but if we can't find a way to say, this is kind of what happened, and in a way that kind of reads well, has the flow, speaks to the narrative we put in place, then I think we're just missing a tremendous opportunity to get that information out, as broadly as we all would like it to go. Sylvia, you had the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. Silvia Cadena, Technical Community. I'm not sure if I am lost in the conversation, but I think it would be, I would like to reinforce what Maria Paz just said, but also would like a little bit of clarification then on how then the efforts from the Diplo Foundation with the daily reporting will fit into this, because there is already a daily report session that comes out of what they do that fits into the daily summary, right? And then each workshop proposer has their own organizers, have appointed a rapporteur. So that means we already have 2 reports that will come at, not necessarily at the same time, let's say, but will not make more sense in terms of management of those resources to just discuss with how Diplo is doing those reports to see if they can assist in how this is implemented. They have already like a system in place, they train the people that are doing it, it's done very well, very used by a lot of people. So I just think that we should try, when possible, to strengthen efforts that are already happening, improve and grow from those, instead of launching a new one and not recognizing the big effort that they have done for so many years to get to that point. Bringing new, journalists from schools from Germany to participate or be supported by Diplo to learn about this process would be fantastic. I have no idea if Teresa and Diplo can actually manage a larger size of people, but my comment, and I know Rudolf has the answer for it, but my comment will be on trying just to make reasonable use of the resources that we have, and strengthen the efforts that are already recognized. People follow the reporting from the Diplo Foundation for years. So that is an audience that is already there, that is used to follow this. And it's actually a very good quality. They actually help us to put our report together. So it's because they capture things that the transcript didn't. So it's very important to, in my opinion, to strengthen things that are already working. So, thank you.
Yes, we totally agree with you there that the point is that we should coordinate all our efforts. And we should also, because also Diplo has a certain style, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It is accessible to people who read it and they enjoy it. We have our own certain style as well, which we must adhere to, which is a little bit drier as well. And I'm sure the host country has its own style. I mean, so we have these certain, so we, yes. So yes, we do have to coordinate instead of having 3 separate streams. We do have to coordinate. I mean, we don't have to produce the same output, but at least we can share the information, share the resources. And if Diplo wants their report out every single day, they shouldn't change it. Yes, they can have it, but as well, they can help us and we can help them and we can feed into each other, and maybe they change their format slightly and we adapt slightly as well. And so there's better synergies that happen. That being said, we do still have to look to see whether it is a good idea to have these students. And I think it is a good idea for them to come in and report as well. And their report is, again, another different objective style. And if they do it and we can use it, and that's good. They learn about internet governance. We get a fresh eyes on these topics, because if you've been in this field for so long, you kind of miss certain things, right? And they may bring in a new angle. So yes, but it's just a matter of coordinating. Yes, we can have different outputs, but we should coordinate and make all our outputs stronger in that way.
If I just could add one point to that, is that most of the reporting that is done from external people, especially for the technical community, is full of errors, right? So there is a lot of misinformation coming from people that are posting, documenting reports on sessions where they don't understand the technical content that is there. So having that coordination that you are mentioning, Chengetai, is really important, especially to check that the technical details are not misinformed, because it will not work in our best interest to be the authoritative source on internet governance if we get wrong the technical parts of how the internet actually works on a report that people will quote and use in media and things like that. So that's slightly my point. And I give the word back to Rudolf. That is
I have not a lot to add to what Chengetai has said. Perhaps we have to, however, make a distinction. I mean, there is freedom of speech and freedom of commenting. So, I mean, everyone can come to the IGF and comment on it and tweet on it and make a summary or whatever. So that is free, and it should stay free. And I would rather not engage into some coordinating work with this kind of people, because it's their right and it's their privilege. So this is one thing. The other thing is when it comes to more official documentation, more official, or let's say to what will be the outcomes that we all approve upon and so forth. I think there we definitely need to work together. We are in contact with the Diplo Foundation already. They will be again reporting, and I think it's definitely worth the effort to sit together and have some joint efforts, as you said. And I think on that basis we can probably get a very good outcome also for this tailing exercise that we are endeavoring. So that's the points I want to make.
Thank you, everyone. We'll go to Mary in the queue. Mary, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Silva has said it all, and Chengetai has reported and agreed for the coordination, because I was worried about what is already existing and how we can leverage on what Diplo is doing. And if we add the infographics that Germany students will be bringing on board, I think it will work very well. But having said that, I needed to know what is the time slot for the topping and the telling. Topping, how long will it take? And telling, how long will it take? And how often will it happen? Will it happen every day? Will it happen at the end? And we know that we still have stock taking at the end of the program, whether that is factored in. Now, looking at the table that Tamara, I think it's Tamara that made this presentation, where you have the tracks, and then the issues that will be coming out of the tracks, and economic, social, cultural, technical, governance. I don't know whether I'm mixing it or I'm missing it. The way we stated that where the economic goes to the private sector, social, cultural, will it go to the civil society or what? And then technical, and in the government, will it go to governance? Governance is beyond government, so will it go to government? So how do we, dovetail all this to the stakeholders that we had earlier stated that we are going to report to each stakeholder and give and make concrete recommendations to each stakeholder group. So I don't know whether I'm not seeing properly or I'm not thinking well again. the social cultural, is that where the human rights will come, human rights group or community will come, will take their bearing from all that will come out from the IGF process and workshops that we are going to organize.
Thank you, Mary. Let me try and answer your questions quickly, and we'll go to Mary Rose. There are 3 topping sessions. I think we'd said they were normal workshop slots of 90 minutes each. That's obviously one per each one of the main themes, and the same thing, there are 3 90-minute tailing sessions for each one of the 3 major thematic tracks. And then the discussions from those 3 tailing sessions is what will feed into the report to the community on the last day as part of a 1-hour slot that's there, the traditional 1-hour slot for taking stock, open mic, and then a formal closing ceremony. So I think that was your first set of questions. So 3 slots for topping, 3 slots for tailing, each 90 minutes, and the discussions that come out of the tailing will be what feeds into the bulk of the reporting at the consolidated wrap-up session or something on the Friday. With respect to the second set of questions and your stakeholders, I thought yesterday we sort of went, and maybe I should double check, and said, not sure if stakeholders is the most valuable because, you know, even though you're a stakeholder, a private sector stakeholder, you could still have, you know, a concern and an interest or a responsibility in something that would be identified as technical for inclusion, for instance. Or, again, the example would be for any of them, that it was more appropriate to kind of look at the intersection, both from the thematic tracks and then kind of the implications for society as a whole, or for the technical community or from a technical perspective. But is there a different perspective on that, or do people think that somehow we need to capture another, make this a cube? Because I don't know if there's a one-on-one alignment with an idea being brought up in any one of the 3 tracks, having just kind of a singular stakeholder focus. Maybe we can play around with a couple of examples and see if that's helpful. And I don't think there was any objection to it. I just think people thought maybe it wasn't kind of broad enough or inclusive enough. But I think we all should think about that whole process and that piece of the reporting out, and maybe, you know, keep Mary's question in mind and move it forward. Mary Rose, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Mary Rose from Private Sector. If I understood it correctly, following the discussion, so we are trying to come up with a way on how we can synthesize all the thematic issues like after the IGF. Is it correct, Madam Chair?
It wasn't even so much synthesize, it was more recognizing the fact that we built this set of 3 programs around a narrative with a lot of thought to kind of what the flow was, and that we wanted to actually make a significant contribution to advancing the discussions around digital inclusion, for instance. What can we do to take that narrative to the next step, which is figure out what a kind of a narrative or a thematic track report out is that isn't, you know, we used to use Chiang Kai's words, so dry as one style of reporting and maybe so, you know, lightweight as another.
Yeah. So my thoughts on that is, since we already have like working groups for each thematic, for each theme, and each group for sure we are the ones familiar with our theme, like from the writing the narratives, selecting the workshops, and coming up with a consolidated report from the rapporteurs afterwards. Then what if we will just, as a working group, we will work on that report and come up with another narrative in response to the narrative that we come up before the event. Like, so what transpires, taking all the reports and the synthesis from the rapporteurs, come up with, again, another narratives to move forward for the next IGF. I mean, in short, I would suggest that the working group would work on that narrative instead of asking universities or students or journalists to write that.
I think that's an interesting idea as well. I'll come back to that in a moment, but I'll go to Ben just now. Ben?
Thanks, Lynn. I wondered if it might be helpful to respond to Mary's question about this grid and the perspectives. I'm certain that there was no thought that this related to stakeholder groups. Indeed, I would hope that ideally every workshop is looking at an issue from the perspective of all the stakeholder groups. I mean, to give an example, like IPv6 addresses, from an economic perspective, what would be the impact of not moving over to IPv6? Is it going to make it more expensive to access the internet? Are those costs going to be passed on to consumers if IPv6 addressing isn't taking up? From a social perspective, you know, are regions left behind? Because some regions have lots of IPv6 addresses, others, some have lots of IP4 addresses left, some don't, and so they're moving over to IPv6 more quickly. From a technical perspective, how technically would you move over? Why would you move over? What's the issue with the internet that requires them to move over? And governance, is it the responsibility of private sector? Is it the responsibility of governments to do it? So I think that's what's meant by trying to understand where the workshops were coming from. What kind of angles were they looking at an issue from? I don't know if that helped, but I know Timay has left, and I thought it would be good to provide an additional response to yours, Lynn.
Thank you, Ben.
Excuse me. Yeah, I understand what where you are coming from, the explanation given here, and I'm saying that stakeholders are responsible, so the shared responsibility in making such happen. Would it not be the right message to send to each of the stakeholder groups? Okay, economic will make it happen, and we are talking about technical. So the responsibility of the stakeholders in that group, I think that's what we're aiming at, and not just throwing those issues out, but making concrete recommendations that they can go home with, they can take away, and try to work on it. I think that's the essence of this platform called Internet Governance, where we come to learn and take back to our constituencies. That's the idea that is occurring to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, for the further. Ben, any other comments on that? I'm going to try and wrap up this conversation, then hit two other items quickly. So I think when I put this forward, it was because I still think it's a very useful tool to have something that builds on the narrative and the streaming and everything we try to do in terms of pulling this set of workshops together to talk about what happened in that thematic track and in those streams here. And I like Mary Rose's suggestion that maybe it's something that we do, which is a relatively small report that is done by the thematic working group, and maybe we can find some consultancy support or something to do that, but something that's owned by the IGF community, frankly. That we can put out a document that said, this is what the IGF community did, not this is what another organization reported on happened at the IGF community, or at the IGF meetings. And one that I think really reflects the things that really matter to the community, as evidenced by the program we put together, and reflects a lot of the multi-stakeholder values and those sorts of things. So it was both kind of I don't even like the term marketing, but an outreach tool, something that documents the work that we've done, the discussion from our perspective of the community, with the community's perspective and values in. Building on, again, the narrative we had this year, and maybe it begins to suggest, a future narrative for next year, or at least it should give us some learnings for next year's narratives. But I think at this point, maybe what we should do is take this discussion into the ad hoc working group, the ad hoc reporting working group we were going to set up, which again, when we're through this meeting, we'll put a little notion out, and I think we can figure out how we tie all these pieces together. We don't, of course, direct Diplo. The German government has actually contracted with Diplo. I'm sure the German government is willing to work with us to get something that works for everybody. But I mean, I do think it's really important that the IGF is something that the IGF owns, that the IGF says, this is from our community and this is what we did. Trying to be really clear here. But let's take it up in the working group, and clearly we want to work with all the people that take the time and effort to actually report out from the IGF, because it's critical and it does reach a whole, broad set of stakeholders. So we're not trying to, to stop any of that. I think it's more just a matter that we're hitting kind of a couple of key targets, if you will. The two things I wanted to come through quickly was we still need to establish a process for that newcomers session. I think we can probably put a request out on the group there. I don't actually know what the current state of the work is, if there's sort of an expectation of what we would do with a newcomers group, or if there's been learnings from past years that the secretary could even say, here's what you'd recommend we do from a newcomer's perspective, or, I mean, how do we kind of best advance some of that work? Anya?
Yes, thank you. So, as you know, since 2016, we were implementing the newcomers track that has its own unique structure. So perhaps the best would be if the Secretariat would share the structure of the previous newcomers track with the MAG, and then we can all work together on improving that track. It was a collaborative work between the Secretariat and the MAG. Because I know that we're almost about to end, so I don't want to take time maybe for going through that structure, but let us send a proposal then on Monday.
Okay, that would be good. We probably have some time to do that as well. But yes, if you could actually get us out of the current state and any recommendations that we might have heard from past year's processes that we want to take into account moving forward. With respect to the next steps here within the workshop, we'll try and put together a timeline which we can send out, but I think we've asked for the main session guidelines to hopefully be updated by the end of this weekend. I believe we're saying that the folks that began working on these 6 main sessions are probably the folks we would expect, at least some of them, to stay engaged. And of course, there are other folks we can reach out to that weren't a part of this MAG meeting. That we would take the next step in terms of the template. Changatai is pointing out that our next MAG meeting is June 26th. And I guess the question to him is, if we were to have a substantive discussion on June 26th around these sessions, is that meeting their timeline? Or do we need to move the meeting up a week or something? I don't know if there's a magic timeline or magic date there as well, but that's obviously only 2.5 weeks away. That would mean that the working groups would be meeting over the next 2 weeks to flesh out a working title, to begin filling out the main session proposal, which would include a small paragraph or description that would have to be put into the program. You need to appoint co-facilitators, and then you need to, each of you, establish your own process for actually organizing that main session with speakers, moderators, rapporteurs, etc. So we probably can't realistically do that work in less than 2 weeks. And if we asked everybody to have the report out by the Friday the 21st, that means we would all have time to read only 6 reports between the 21st and the 26th. Because on the 26th, we need to be prepared, I think, to call whether or not we'll move forward with these main sessions or not. Jutta and then Benny.
That would be the last day after Eurodic, so that would be the Eurodic week, and that might be a little bit difficult for some of us to have it ready on that Friday. Probably better on Monday, then we could at least have the weekend and the traveling time to finalize.
And I also want to make that some of us here will be at the ICANN meeting, which is also that week, and the 26th actually is an active day. And maybe instead of having the weekend, as Jutta is suggesting, which is maybe we can just, you guys can tell us whether we can have the call maybe a week later instead of the 26th, if that is not going to ruin a lot of your work. Because, for certainty, at least the two of us plus a couple of others who will be there.
Yes, we can do it. It just seems that in the past that 30th of June was the magic date, and then after 1st of July everybody goes on break. So that's why we wanted to keep it in June. But if you can, if you will be all around, and we had... yeah, we can do it.
July 1st or 2nd is that Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah, so, we'll be here. It's just from past experiences, if nobody's going on, July break, because we usually had those, then it's fine. And then because that's the same week as the 4th of July and etc. So the Secretariat is fine with it, so to speak. we can delay things by a week. It won't do that much harm as such.
Yes, so maybe July 1st or 2nd is still better. I agree. July 4th is obviously. But 1st or 2nd, Monday, Tuesday?
So we'll let the Secretariat work towards that, but shoot for July 1st or 2nd. So we'll have to update the meeting calendar. Could I ask the Secretariat to kick things off, to set up mailing lists for each one of the main sessions that have the MAG members that participated in the room here in that mailing list? We should then advertise that to all of the other MAG members so that people can sign up for additional working groups and those that weren't here and participate. And the main sessions have always been the responsibility of the MAG to organize. I think some organizing groups have invited in other people or had discussions with other experts to flesh out the topics and things a little bit more. I think we can leave that decision or determination up to each one of the working groups. If there's somebody that's an ex-MAG member or somebody dying to be a MAG member, and they've got specific expertise in a group and they would help the group in their work and deliberations, then I think there's no reason not to bring them in. I think the co-facilitators have to be 2 MAG members though, and I think that's one of the things we need to identify quite quickly so that the Secretariat knows who to kind of ping and follow up with as we go through this process. So I think we need to get kind of a memo out to the MAG, kind of outlining this kind of main session process and timeline and mailing lists and all that sort of thing. Is there anything else that we're forgetting in terms of how we process our way through getting organized for those meetings? June, were you?
Hello, I'm June, in case you don't know me. I just want to remind people about the charter. We need to have the charter approved for the working group on outreach and engagement. We've just sent the email out again. So if you could have a look, please, and approve so that we can start the process before the IGF. Thank you.
No, thank you. That is a good reminder. I don't know if people have had a chance to look at it, and we want to try and do that quickly here, or we do it online. Problem with doing it online is everybody says they're going to do it, and only a handful do. I know they've had some positive comments and feedback already, and it's been out in front of everybody for some weeks. Why don't we give people till Monday, and if there are any kind of comments or any points of disagreement, people have until Monday to say so, otherwise it's approved. And again, I say that on the basis of the reviews that have already come in and comments that have come in. Also, it's been in front of us for some time. My last comment was simply on that, again, earlier in the week, seems like a long time ago, but I think it was only 2 days ago, Wednesday, there was a discussion on the HLPDC report, and which obviously will be launched on Monday, and agreement that the Secretariat would put up in the commenting platform the report so that we could use that to kick off a process across the IG community. I think we need to see the report and read the report to figure out how else we might structure and what we might do in terms of breaking out some of the discussion. Maybe at one simple point is we sort of do it by chapter or something so that we can keep, those comments at least organized, consistent with the way the work is, and we may in fact need to break some of the chapters out into kind of other subsequent ones. But I think Chengetai said that they can have that up on the Monday with the launch, and he and I will work on a cover note that we can send out to everybody as well. Is that still possible?
Technically, it's possible. We have to see the format which the report comes out. If it comes out in a Word document, then it's easy. If not, then we might have to go a little bit back and forth. But yes, Monday.
Do we not have...
I just don't want to give a 100% yes, but yeah, yes. Yeah.
Do we not have somebody that's very close to the Secretariat that surely could simply get it saved in a different format? One that we need to post once it's done?
I can investigate that, yes.
I would suspect that it might already be done as well, because it's probably being translated in 6 languages. So I'm just saying that I really...
as I said, yes, I just don't want to give something that I'm not 100% sure of.
Right. Nebosha, sorry? Use the...
I was just saying to share an advance copy to all MAG members.
Sure, if you can send it to me, then we can,
I think that's a great idea, and I think SG's office will be very happy because since we know that they will be starting a consultation, this will only help. But as Chengetai said, if the report is available only in PDF, then we may try to get it Tuesday or Monday, Tuesday, and then as soon as you have the Word file, I think it's easy to do it. Yeah. And I think it will be chapters, executive summary chapters, and the platform allows to put everything together and then comment on specific pages.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. And we can work on the note in between. Xiao Feng, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the door. Sorry for reopening the workshop process. I do recommend that workshop 271 in data governance should be conditionally accepted because it needs more interaction to strengthen the workshop. I also do want to recommend 277 to integrate into 271 workshop. 271 and 277 are 2 highly ranked workshops on big data. Moreover, 277 is the first option in data governance theme. It deploys big data and partnership for SDGs, and therefore it appears quite related to the global data governance for developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiao Feng. This was obviously within the data governance thematic.
I'm sorry.
Work stream, I'm guessing, because you're asking the MAG to do something which would mean sort of opening the process back up, and I think is also, an opportunity that wasn't afforded to other workshop proposers,
yes,
nor other MAG members. I'm assuming that the working group was kind of made aware of this request and dealt with it in the thematic working group meetings. I don't know if, if we want to get any additional background on this or not, or if there's, from what I understand is that one of them, 277, I think, is one that was actually recommended, is in the program. It was ranked quite highly. The other one was not ranked particularly highly, didn't make it into the program. And we did ask all the thematic working group members to look at possible suggestions for mergers if in fact it strengthened the proposals or helped gaps or diversity or that sort of other thing. I don't know if that was done or there's an opportunity to do that, but I think the only opportunity they might be, and I think we need to ask the MAG to comment on whether or not they think this is a fair process given the way we've treated all the other workshops. But I would think that probably the only way to actually address this was if the thematic working group folks thought it was appropriate to ask those that were in the accepted workshop whether or not there was any points they would care to pull forward from the other workshop in. I don't think to do it the reverse, which I think is what you were suggesting, Zhao Feng, is appropriate. So I think there's two questions: how the MAG feels about running kind of an exceptional process, or to do this with this one working group. To me, it's a slippery slope and probably contravenes some fairness, but I think we need to hear from the MAG. Obviously, there's been a little bit of discussion on this in the background already, but we really need to hear from the MAG. Ben?
As I coordinated the data governance working group, maybe I can just explain a bit the process and where we ended up to give MAG members a bit more time to reflect on how they might want to respond. And I don't know if Eleonora has the document. Fantastic, thank you, Eleonora. So we looked at the top 16 and we decided to put them through. We then discussed within the group which other proposals might make up the final 4 slots. And within the group, we kind of ranked, gave our individual rankings. And so we identified 4 more slots, 4 more workshops. And we made suggestions, as you said, for where these accepted workshops might consider merging, or not merging, but incorporating ideas. We didn't suggest for any of them that we put in any conditions. That was an approach that our working group took. But rather that they, in some cases, and this was one of them, that Workshop 271 look at Workshop 277 and see whether it could bring in some ideas, some speakers to broaden its workshop. And that was something we did in relation to 5 different workshops of our top 20. You will remember that we suggested in the recommendations at the bottom of the page that if there was additional space found, because 5 of our workshops are shorter than 90 minutes, that 3 workshops could be put through, and we put them in order. And in fact, the first workshop out of those 3 that could be put through, if there is additional time, would be Workshop 277. But that really depends on the Secretariat going back after everything and seeing whether there's additional time. So there are the process that we went through and the recommendations that we made to the MAG and the lack of objections yesterday allowed both for Workshop 271 to specifically look at 277, that was a recommendation, and possibly for 277 to be given time. That's the process that I organized the group by, and the one that I would stand by, and I would see this as making an exception. But obviously, it's up to all MAG members to provide comments on whether they would like to look at this differently.
I might actually change my opening comments then, because I didn't realize that it was actually on if there was room and it can be improved, there could be a potential slot. So at one level, we're not looking for an exceptional process. It's the same process we ran for every one of the working groups, where we said if there is additional room in the schedule, and we wanted to maintain still the 2 rooms per thematic track, that we had asked the workshop groups to recommend additional workshops. So, given that, I would say we could leave it to the Secretariat, at least the next step of the turn of the Secretariat to see what we actually have for room. Sounds like there is room, particularly because what Chengetai said is we don't want to have 2 rooms that are dedicated to data governance and then we just slip into security workshops. I mean, that kind of runs away. So those 2 days worth, those 2 rooms worth, 2 tracks worth of rooms were dedicated to data governance, and it seems as though there would be room. So maybe it's a conditional acceptance if it is strengthened along the lines of what the working group suggested, which I guess is part of the normal process with the Secretariat. But is that a truth?
No, that's true. So is it okay if you leave it to us? And we'll get back to you next week and give you a definitive answer for the workshop 277.
So I think it's a fair process. I think it's an equivalent process across the 3 working groups. I think we said earlier in the week that the Secretariat was going to look through the approved workshops, now that they know exactly which ones were approved and the time that's allotted. And if there's extra space, look at, and most of them said there was some extra space, would look at the proposed additional workshops. Those that are have conditions associated with them, they would communicate with the workshop organizers that the conditions are met and there's space that they would be accepted into the workshop. So I think this is just a standard next turn of the process.
Excuse me, Chair.
Mary?
Okay, I think the request is that they're ready to merge.
The working group wasn't suggesting a merger. They had a very strong
We made a
standalone
suggestion that it could be
proposal.
merged, isn't it? We made a suggestion that it could be merged with 271, and I think they are ready to have it merged.
Ben?
I can read out the recommendation that we made. That we would approve workshop 271 with the following suggestions. Firstly, that more interaction could strengthen the workshop. Secondly, we recommend that you look at workshop 277 to see whether there are any concepts or speaker ideas that could be integrated into your workshop. 277 explores big data and partnership for SDGs and therefore appears quite related to the global data governance for developing countries. The IGF Secretariat will be happy to put you in touch with the proposer of that workshop. So we proposed that they looked at that to possibly strengthen their workshop. We didn't propose any of our workshops were merged or that were approved on condition that they merged. We took a softer approach and we judged that the top 16 were through on merit and should be allowed to stay as they were, but we made suggestions for improvements. That was the process that our working group took. I know that some of the working groups required some mergers. That's not something that we did for any of them. So this would be an exception. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I'm going to go to the queue in a moment, but I want to be clear that I think we're not asking for an exception for this workshop, that this is within the next turn of the wheel on every one of the tracks that the MAG already approved as a process. Just because I think it wasn't quite clearly understood the other way in the first instance. Raquel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. First of all, as part of a silent member in the data governance group, I just want to stand by the process that Ben outlined and to support the fairness of the process that has been done. But that raised me to another point, and I'm sorry, I was looking to the transcripts from yesterday afternoon to see if this was raised. If yes, just point me out. But the lightning sessions that we did in the past, there might be an opportunity also. We've used the best ranked up to a certain grade for showcasing some of those initiatives into different environments, if there is also a possibility within the venue. If this is something the MAG wants to consider as one of the formats, it depends on the venue, it depends on the grading. But then I think we approached in the first come, first served basis of requests from those rejected workshops, but good standing workshop proposals. In terms of the details for the process, perhaps if this is something the MAG wants to follow up, we could invite the former MAG members MAG member Miguel Estrada, who was leading this effort to outline, and we could consider. But I just put in the table. Thank you.
So I think most of your comments were to the lightning process, which we did discuss yesterday, and we will kick off that process once we're through all that, which is important. I want to make clear here that I think we actually have the next steps in front of us. We asked the working groups to identify which other workshops they might pull up if there was additional time, and to put them in an order of priority, which is exactly what the Data Governance Working Group has done. I think we've heard that there are additional slots and time available because some of the ones that were accepted were not 90 minutes. We have the number one proposal that should be pulled up right there. I think it's probably a straightforward pull-up. So let's just go through the rest of the comments quickly, see if there's anything we're missing. But again, I think that we're just following kind of standard process here. And your point on the lightning workshops is good, and we need to come to that as part of the returning to the workshops. Jennifer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lynn. Jennifer Chung, private sector for the record. Actually, I think Ben and yourself have, and also Raquel, have illuminated the next steps for this process quite well. I guess I just wanted to point out that I do really respect the processes that each evaluation group did come up with. I'm not part of the data governance group. I'm part of the security group that Yuta very skillfully led through. And we also have more than 20. We have the 20 conditional accepted workshops. And then we also went through and looked at other workshops that we could pull in after calculating the time. So I do respect that. I'm sure the IGF Secretariat will be looking at available time slots, and then the next ones will be put in. So that's actually a good thing. Another thing is I really do respect that the suggestion was to look at other workshops to bolster different parts of diversity, which it looks like the Data Governance Workshop has done so, to look at different speakers, different regional topics, which are very important. So I definitely do support that that part. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was a good recap of the process too. Thank you. Paul Rowney, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm guessing adding on to what most people have said, and I can't speak on behalf of the data group, but I know from our side, we went through quite a comprehensive process. I think if the workshop can be accommodated, I think it should. It's already in the parking lot, so there is a possibility that it can be included. But I just also wanted to mention that when you look at the workshops that have been identified so far, China is very underrepresented. So I think we also need to keep that in mind as well, that it's of the interest of the MAG to have that level of diversity and to bring in countries such as China. So I don't think we should change the process. I think we should see how the process can accommodate, including the workshop or some of the speakers that are involved in those workshops as well. So that should also be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Some very good points. Mary, you have the floor.
Thank you. I had hit hand down, so I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Then I think, has been stated a couple of different times, it follows the next logical turn of the process. We should wait and let that process run its course. It sounds like the prognosis is good, Xiaofeng, and we'll let the Secretariat do their work. And at the same time, I think we do want to be careful about not kind of using our position on the MAG here to inappropriately advocate for our workshops, which is a concern I've had a few people express to me. So with that, I think we've gone through virtually everything on the agenda except for one item, which I'm not proposing we do now. On number 9, we'd had the strategic priorities where we were going to talk about IGF outputs and reporting mechanisms, including outreach and communications. I think we've kind of hit that at a couple of different times over the course of these few days, and we can pick that up in this ad hoc reporting group we're going to set up. The other piece that was included in there was the multi-year work program. And I think we can continue to take that forward on the list. As I've said before, lots of component pieces of what we wanted to do with the multi-year work program are already in place or underway. And I think there's one kind of open item which I really would like to kind of figure out if we're going forward, not going forward this year, next year, just so it's not continually hanging out there. And I will work with Jeremy Malcolm and a few of the other folks that have interest in that in terms of making sure we bring it forward to the MAG at an appropriate time. With that, I would like to say a very big thank you to everybody, certainly to the German government, as I said earlier. Rudolph's going, okay, enough. Let me go home, let me go home.
Wait for November.
And to DESA, and I'll give the thanks to Dennis in a moment, but I do really appreciate DESA's support and interest. I think YMIN's been in the WebEx chat room for most of the 3 days as well. So I think this is a really good partnership. And also to the MAG members who have all worked tremendously hard over the last couple of months on the workshop review process. And obviously we have kind of one more big push ahead of us with respect to main sessions and some of the activities there. But just thank you very, very much. And I really think this is kind of the more cohesive sort of programs we've had for a while, and I hope really result in a significant sort of stream of substantive output, which is, I think, the next step we need to do in some of the work here that really shows the contribution, benefit, and value of the work, which of course is one of the repeated requests for improvements we have. So thank you, and Dennis, I'll give you the last word.
I know it's too late, but I just want to thank everyone as well, starting with the MAC and also the German government for the venue. Venue is excellent. I've never seen somewhere like that, and also for the involving other stakeholders in open consultation, and also for these 2 days you treated us very well. Maybe last but not least, we should also thank Lynn. This is, I think, her last face-to-face MAC meeting. Maybe I'm not wrong, but yeah. So thank you everyone and have a nice flight.
But I hope we will see Lynn face-to-face at the meeting in Berlin in November.
So. No.
Yeah, I meant chairing. I meant chairing the meeting.
No, I'm committed to this through the IGF, which is of course that's when the chair position ends. Fully committed over the next 4 months or so. So thank you everybody. Safe travels.
Thank you everybody. Technical community, please. We have 5 minutes meeting. Technical community, please. Thank you.
Sorry, also the transcribers and the technical team behind us as well, please. Yeah.
And the 7 o'clock rule applies also today for the door.